By popular demand, we're doing a video on procrastination. So procrastination, for those of you that don't know, is where you're avoiding doing work because there's something much more interesting you could be doing, or the work is just so boring that you don't want to do it, so you're always delaying it to a later time. In my mind, procrastination is an umbrella term for a range of different things, but I think there are two main categories that most situations fall under, and I call them avoidance procrastination and conditional procrastination. So avoidance procrastination is where you're avoiding doing work because there's something much more interesting you could be doing instead. I think that's the most common type. But conditional procrastination is where you really want to do the thing, but the conditions aren't perfect for it. For example, I really want to play the guitar, but I don't think I have enough time, or I'm worried about not being as good as I used to be. Avoidance is the type I think most people have issues with, and it's the type that most people look for solutions for. But I think the solution for avoidance procrastination in theory is actually incredibly simple, but in practice it's difficult to implement. Because the solution to avoidance is to make the work more interesting than the alternative. So for example, if your work is accounting, where you're just entering tons of numbers, and the alternative is hours and hours of entertaining YouTube or Netflix content, then you can see how this is off balance. If the accounting work was much more interesting and engaging than the YouTube/Netflix content, then of course you'd want to do the accounting work instead. But naturally in practice, that's not really possible to implement. But is there anything you can do to help with this? But one of the most common techniques that people tend to implement to combat avoidance procrastination is zoning. And what zoning is, it's where you allocate yourself certain spaces to do specific things. So for example, you have a space to do your work, a space for recreation, a space for sleep, and a space for eating and exercise, for example. This is good because I think it prevents you from falling into your regular subconscious autopilot habits. So for example, if your space to work prevents you from accessing the internet or certain websites that you tend to look around quite a lot, like Reddit or Facebook, for example, then by eliminating those, you force yourself out of the habit of clicking onto those and continually refreshing the page. Sometimes if your zones are mixed and your work and recreation is in the same place, then you might be drifting between your work and the recreational content without even realizing it. So just having that line of separation forces you from moving between the two automatically. The YouTuber CGP Grey actually put out a really interesting video recently called Lockdown Productivity Spaceship U. It deals a lot with physical and mental well-being during the current global situation, and it puts a lot of emphasis on the benefits and importance of zoning areas for yourself. And I know that in discussions with other blended YouTubers, a certain number of them also tend to employ this technique to help them with their productivity. But still, as useful as zoning is, I think it's still a band-aid and it doesn't really solve the core problem, which is the imbalance of interest or entertainment between the work and the alternative. And I don't think there is a good way to solve that because it's highly dependent on the type of work that you're avoiding and the type of personality. You know, some people find spreadsheets extremely exciting, some people find it the most boring thing in the world. Now, it may be some of the most impractical advice I ever give, but if the current work you're doing is leading you to procrastinate all the time, then find different work. But of course, that's much easier said than done. I think one of the things that makes avoidance procrastination really tricky is that it's more of a subconscious problem than a conscious one. You'll be doing the work, and then without really realizing it, your mind will drift onto another subject if the work is just so boring and so unengaging that your brain decides, okay, this is not worth putting any attention on, so let's just do something else instead. It's like falling asleep, and I'm sure you've done it as well. Like you're looking at your work and then all of a sudden, without realizing it, you've just gone into a dream world and you've probably even clicked away to some different website without even consciously thinking about it. Now, in reality, there's no real way to prevent yourself from doing that without employing habit-breaking techniques like zoning, for example. Alternatively, mixing up your environment, it doesn't need to be your physical environment. For example, on your computer, you know where to go for your favorite websites and your favorite programs and stuff. If you make it harder for yourself to find those things, then it should take extra steps and more conscious effort, and then consequently should pull you out of that autopilot mode so you can catch yourself consciously in the act of moving away from the work and then take a step back to it. There are also different types of applications and programs that you can use on your computer that prevent you from accessing the internet or certain websites or programs at certain times of the day. So if you're getting really frustrated at yourself for accessing a certain type of content, then maybe that's something you can try. Now, some people deal with both types of procrastination at the same time, so we're going to spend a bit of time talking about conditional procrastination, and then you can see if any of it applies to you. So if you are dealing with it, the first thing you need to do is identify the reason why you're putting off the work. One possible reason might be that you're afraid of failing if you try, and that this might lead to some kind of embarrassment. For example, maybe you really want to try singing, and you're putting off trying it because you're afraid of being a bad singer, and this will lead to embarrassment. Maybe you're afraid of wasting time and making poor investments, and you're thinking that despite the fact that you have a strong desire to work on this project, you don't want to put in that investment because you're afraid of wasting the time and therefore having regrets. Alternatively, maybe you're afraid of frustration, and rather than jump into the project straight away and then bump into issue after issue and then have to do extra research, you would rather spend more time doing the research beforehand before you jump in, so you know that when you are doing it, you're doing it perfectly. But then you realize that one day of research turns into a week, which turns into a month. And then before you know it, you haven't started on the project. And now you're looking through your social media feeds and seeing all the other people putting up their cool stuff. And then you question your own time investments and realize that you always had another excuse for never starting. Maybe you had obligations for other people. Maybe you needed to always consider financial stability and work on more important things. But despite all of this, you realize that you still had time to play Animal Crossing. Feel free to leave your turnip prices in the comments below. It might be a combination of all these things, but once you start identifying it with some self-reflection, then you can start attacking them. Again, I can't tell you how to solve these problems personally, because a lot of these issues that we talk about are highly dependent on personality and life experience. But what I can try and help you do is implement some kind of self-reflection so you can pull these anxieties, these fears, these insecurities out of your mind and try and look at them objectively and rationalize them. But, since this is my channel, what about me? What do I do for my procrastination? And well, I don't really do anything. I just embrace what I'm interested in at the time, and if I'm working on something and something more interesting pops up, then I'll just go and work on that instead. I don't really plan my days out. At most, I'll just have a few tasks that I want to get done, and if they don't get done on a specific day, then I will carry them over to the next day. And then if there's any extra ideas I have for things I want to make, then I throw them into a Trello board. I tend to never work on one single project because I know that for me personally, it will never get done. So what I do instead is I work on multiple projects at once of different sizes. And the reason is because the perfectionist in me will start kicking in, and I will start overanalyzing all the little things that I could change, and I'll start thinking about all the ways that people will interpret the work. And those anxieties will build up, and because I've got nothing else coming after the project, it's just empty space. I look at it and I think, okay, there's a void, it's scary, there's nothing to do, so I don't want to cross the finish line because I don't want to be in that empty area. So instead what I do is I fill that void with a multitude of other projects, and I make sure that I don't think of it as a linear path. That way, crossing the finish line of the main project is exciting for me because I know that there's things I want to get working on after that. Because then what comes after the finish line is much easier to visualize, and the anxiety of not having anything to do sort of fades away. Now I become motivated to finish the main project because I want to get working on all these other things. Now, as someone with a mixed media skill set, having multiple projects at once is a way for me to get rid of avoidance procrastination. Because I'm not obliged to finish any specific one of these projects, what happens is that as I'm working on one, I'm playing around with others and sometimes finishing them. And then sometimes I think, okay, I'm really bored of this idea, so I can just throw it away. And then I'll make something else instead. And then surrounding this project will have a bunch of other new projects, and then I finish them as well. So lots of projects get knocked off because they become too boring to me, but sometimes I put them in what I call a hibernation state, which means I'll come back to them again in the future. But at the same time, lots of side projects get finished, and these are sometimes completely unrelated to the projects I was originally working on. And this is sometimes represented in my YouTube channel and my artwork because a lot of the subjects I do are very scatterbrained. Basically, while I'm not finishing what I originally set out to do, I'm still completing lots of other tasks. So I'm productive through procrastination rather than productive through organization. Unfortunately, this approach to life and work is not applicable to everyone because I have complete control over what needs to get done and what doesn't. If you're working for someone else, then that's not going to apply because you have projects and you're obliged to finish those specific projects, so you can't throw them away. I consider the thinking process a very valuable part of my work, and because of that, I'm working all of the time. I'm thinking while I'm sleeping, while I'm eating, while I'm brushing my teeth, while I'm in the shower, and so on. I'm always coming up with ideas, and I think too many people have the opinion that if you're not obviously working on something, then you're not working at all, and that's not necessarily true. If you watch my imposter syndrome video, then you know that a couple of things I said in that was that hard work does not necessarily equal success, and that ideas are only a multiplier of execution. Forcing yourself to work hard and work all the time, just for the sake of avoiding procrastination, is not necessarily a good way to go through life. But again, if you've got obligations, then yes, it will help with that. For me, as a professional prosumer mixed media creative, as I'm sure there are others watching this as well, I don't think forcefully avoiding procrastination is a good way to go about making content. In 2017, Gleb Alexandrov also did a short video expressing the same idea, that they don't do anything to combat procrastination because it's part of what keeps them creative. But here's the thing, as I said, it completely depends on your personality, and just because I don't do anything to combat my procrastination, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. Because being organized and being regimented and having zones gives people comfort, but not everyone. because there are some people, especially prolific creatives, that feel imprisoned by zones, and having concrete lines of separation between what they enjoy and what they're working on is not necessarily a good thing because it prevents creative links from being made. I think there are very definite observations that should be made of the differences between very creative and non-creative personalities. Not that there's ever a categorical line between the two, because there definitely isn't, but I think the differences should be observed and taken into consideration when giving advice to people of what they should do with their life in terms of how to focus on their work, how to avoid procrastinating, and so on. This is why, going back to CGP Gray's video, which I definitely recommend watching because it was excellent, it doesn't necessarily take into consideration different personality types. Zoning, especially in a time like this, may make some people feel more isolated. Intentional zoning, to help with focus and productivity, will make some people feel better and more confident and comfortable, but it may also make some other people feel more imprisoned, more apathetic, less free to do what they like, consequently less creative, and possibly less happy. But here's something to keep in mind. Most of your thinking and process for creativity is not a conscious effort. If you want to help with making good ideas flow naturally, then you need to get into a lifestyle where it's easy for your subconscious to make links between your different experiences. Zoning may be detrimental to that because it forces you to separate your different types of experiences into different categories and then prevents links from being made between them. So that's why I would say it's up to you to take a look at these different techniques and adapt them to your personality and see what works for you. So what's the bottom line here? How do you deal with procrastination? How do you combat it? Should you even try? In all honesty, I don't know, and if anyone tells you they have a solid solution to this issue, then I don't think you should trust them. The reason why I don't know is because I'm not inside of your head, and I don't understand your deep personality and what you want to achieve in life. If you want to be productive and you feel like adding extra layers of organization will help you feel more comfortable in achieving this, then go ahead and do it. But if the idea of forcing yourself into a more organized and regimented lifestyle makes you feel more uncomfortable, then don't do it. But I think you should definitely experiment with different ideas and see if any resonate with you. At the end of the day, you are the one that has control over yourself. It's been interesting occasionally talking to the other members of the Blenderness crew about this because we have different approaches, because we have quite different personality types, which I think makes us quite a good dynamic. Southern Shotty, in one of the earlier Blenderness episodes, expressed his interest in the zoning technique and how important it was, and Ducky has recently been employing more layers of organization in his life, especially for timing and having a routine throughout the day. Me and CG Matter are much more chaotic in our lifestyles. We just tend to work on what we want to when we want to. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just completely depends on what you want to achieve and how your personality works, and how much freedom you have in your life. Because it needs to be acknowledged that some people have personalities that make them want to have more freedom, but they're just in a life situation that does not allow for it. And of course that's quite detrimental to mental health in the long run, and it's something that should be avoided. But if you're in a situation like that, maybe it comes from employment, then the first step to finding a happier you is to know that you should get out of that situation in some way. This is why I would say to people that it's better being in a job that makes you happy but pays less, because that would be better towards your mental well-being in the long term. And being happier with your work and more entertained and intrigued by it would also probably help with reducing avoidance procrastination anyway, just as a side effect. But of course, as we've said, not everyone is in a position where they have those choices available to them. Okay, I'm sorry if this video was quite a bit rambly. These subjects are quite difficult to talk about, and they quite often have so many caveats saying, well, this doesn't apply to everyone, this doesn't apply to everyone. I get it, and I get that that's frustrating because everyone wants easy solutions to life. But I feel like I always need to put that caveat in because I don't want people to be upset if the advice I give doesn't work for them, because that's just not how life works. Life is complex and unpredictable and unexpected. If I was a smarter person, then maybe I would have picked an easier topic to talk about, but I quite like the challenge because I don't know how this is going to go before I start recording, because as you know, I've started trying to reduce the amount of script that I write for videos. But I kind of feel like maybe that's why this was so heavily requested, because I think that people like seeing how I talk on the spot about these types of subjects. But now I think it's time to talk about the sponsor, and yes, of course, it's Sketchfab. It's the only company I've accepted a sponsor from because I genuinely love what they do. You may already know Sketchfab for providing the best 3D model viewer for web, but you might not know that they actually have an online store for buying and selling 3D models. You can use the built-in model inspector to preview the geometry of the mesh and all of the textures so you know exactly what you're getting before buying. There's a wide variety of content available and a good number of dedicated artists providing high-quality content across a wide range of subjects. If you're interested in maybe selling your own models on the store, then you can also consider applying to become a seller. So thanks for sponsoring this video, Sketchfab, and thank you to all of you for watching this video. Feel free to leave any tips and any advice you have for combating procrastination in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow me on social media, subscribe to my Gumroad mailing list, and maybe even join our Discord server. Here are some cool results from our latest Discord art challenge, which was recreate a scene from a movie. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to talk about. If not, then I'll just do my own random thing as I usually do. So thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time. By the way, if you're interested in picking up Star Citizen at some point, this is not a sponsorship. I have left my referral code at the bottom of the description. If you use it when signing up for an account, you'll get me a ton of free stuff, and this will really annoy my friends. So